First, solve a quadratic equation by graphing the associated quadratic function. Now, yesterday, we talked about the difference between a quadratic equation and a quadratic function. Now, this problem is going to actually have both of them in there. So you're going to see what they're saying. It says solve x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0 by graphing the function y equals x squared minus x minus 20. Now, this thing right here is definitely a quadratic equation. How do I know that's a quadratic equation?
Because it has an x squared.
It's got an x squared in it. Doesn't have any x3s, x4s, x5s. And it says, yeah, and it's got an equal sign. So it's a quadratic equation. What we can do is, if you will take this quadratic equation and turn it into a function. And remember, a function means that you're going to say like y equals. And so we're going to say y equals the quadratic part of it. X squared minus x minus 20. We can find the answers to a quadratic equation just by graphing it. The answers are going to be the points where the parabola hits the x-axis. Remember, a quadratic function is a parabola? So you're going to see this U shape. And wherever it hits the x-axis, those are going to be the answers to this quadratic equation. So in my graphing calculator, I'm going to graph y equals x squared minus x plus 20, or minus 20. And when I graph it, since it's quadratic, expect to see a parabola. The places where it hits the x-axis, that's where your solutions are. So over here, it's at negative what?
4.
Negative 4. And then over here to the right, it's at positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So your two solutions are at negative 4 and positive 5. What you see is your A. Now, when you come back to what they actually ask you to do, if you just stopped right here and stopped reading, they say solve this. Solve x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. When somebody asks you to solve a quadratic equation, what is one way that we can do that? Using the quadratic formula. Now the rest of it is a suggestion, because it's a new way that you can solve this thing. If you put it in and see the parabola, tell me where it hits the x-axis. That's new. But the quadratic formula, that's what we learned before. It'll still get you the same two answers. So let's look at it. The quadratic formula written down here. If I'm using this right here, x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0, what's my a, b, and c? My a is
negative 1,
negative 1, and negative 20. So what I can put in my calculator is x equals negative b. Well, since it's already negative, x equals 1. Plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So all over 2 times 1. Put this in your calculator with the plus sign, and then put it in your calculator with the minus sign, and we should still get those same answers that you saw on the u. So 1 plus square root. There's where the 5 is, and if I come back up here, do it again, change that first plus sign to a minus or subtract, there's my negative 4. So using the quadratic formula to solve it, I found out that it was 5 and negative 4. Graphing it, I found out that the U shape hit the x-axis at negative 4 and 5. So it's two different ways to get the same answer. Now on this next one, do not work ahead, because what I want to do is kind of divide the class where half of us, here's the quadratic equation. So I want to go like, let's go right here and divide this way. So we got Shaughnessy, we got Caitlin this way. I want all of you to take the graphing calculator. I want you to put it in the graphing calculator. And then I want everybody at this table and over this way, use the yellow calculator, solve this with the quadratic formula. Remember, A is 5, B is 40, and C is 0. Okay, if you're doing the quadratic formula, notice this is how Brenda did it. She stored A, B, and C with this calculator. 5 stores A, 40 stores B, and 0 stores C. And then she just put the quadratic formula in, and she got one answer of 0 and one answer of negative 8. Now when you guys look at the graphing calculator, it's kind of hard to see that it's hitting at 0.
Here.
Okay. So this is what Tori put in, was this.
Wrong.
And when she goes to graph it, she can clearly see the -8. It's a little harder to see the 0, but it's there. It's kind of this part of it right there. So it crosses at -8 and 0. Just one example when it's a little bit harder to see, but it is there. So we're crossing at -8 and 0. You get that both ways. Now let's switch. So on this next one, flip over to the back side. And let's do the exact opposite. So you guys are from Shaughnessy and Caitlin over this way. You guys use the yellow calculator and the quadratic formula to solve this problem. And then you guys over here graph it. Let's just throw it in as y equals and see what you guys get. And we'll look at the quadratic formula first, and then we'll look at what the graph looks like second. Okay. All right, Jeff uses, he stores, but he uses x, y, and z instead. So just be prepared for this. All right, so instead of using a, b, and c, Jeff says, okay, -4 is x, so it's like his a. -16 is y, it's b. -16 is z, that's his c. And then he puts the quadratic formula in like this with x, y's, and z's instead. And he got -2 on the first time he did it, and then he changed the sign, and he got -2 the second time he did it. And when they're both -2, that means you just have one answer, and it's -2. Now, if you graphed it, that means if you graph this thing, expect it to only touch the y or the x-axis once. So when you graph it, and this one was Leslie's, and she has it in here, like that. And when you graph it, this is what it looks like to only hit once, right there. So that means the only time you hit the x-axis is at the peak, at the vertex of this thing. It's like it comes up, it just kisses the axis and goes back down. And then right there is the answer, and it has x equals to -2. All right, now this last one. Here's where you get the choice. Whichever, out of those two methods, you've done both. Whichever you like out of the two methods, let's go ahead and do that for this one. Whether you think graphing is better, and some people actually think that they like doing the quadratic formula better. So either way. So this time I'm going to show you if you put it in the graphing calculator, remember the solutions are going to be where that parabola hits the x-axis. So there it is in. When I go to graph it, it doesn't hit the x-axis. So if your solutions are where this thing hits the x-axis and it doesn't, we end up with no real solution. Now Jacob, he put his in, he used the store button. He put his A, B, and C in. And he went down here and he did it, and it said error. And then he tried it with yeah, we did it both ways. We just tried it twice. It just says error. So remember, when you try to do the quadratic formula and you get error, that means you have no real solutions. We're looking at your picture, no real solutions. But before we put anything up, hold up. Sometimes it's okay to say you have no real solutions. But remember, if you're doing a quadratic and you got no real solutions, you have two, what? Imaginary ones. So if your answer choices let you say no real solutions, go for it. But if you have to look at your answer choices and you see something with an I in there, remember the quadratic formula. The reason you have no solutions is because something bad is happening in the formula. Where's the bad thing happening?
The square root.
Yeah.
Something in the square root is negative.
Something up in here is negative. So what you need to do, if you need to find the imaginary answers, you have to write out the quadratic formula and find out what is negative in here. It's the only reason you're not getting real solutions is because b squared minus 4ac, the discriminant, is negative. Okay, that is it.